Elise Whitaker sat by the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Rain tapped the windows in a soft, rhythmic lullaby, the kind that made things feel still, almost suspended. Noah was late again. She stared at the text he'd sent an hour ago. Caught up at work. Don't wait up. It was the third time this week. She thumbed the screen off, her expression unreadable. The corner of her lip twitched as if about to smile, or snarl, but settled into nothingness. Upstairs, the sound of the baby monitor was silent. No crying. Just the static hum of white noise. Their daughter, Harper, was 2, precocious, and more attuned to tension than either of them realized. Chapter 2. Secrets wrapped in gray suits. Noah pulled his car into the driveway at 11:46 p.m. The inside smelled faintly of takeout and cologne, except it wasn't his cologne. His hands shook slightly as he turned off the ignition. He stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His jaw was tight. He still wore his wedding ring. He hesitated. He thought about the woman from work, Natalie, the one who'd lingered a little too long after meetings, who'd laughed a little too easily at his jokes, who listened when Elise didn't. Or couldn't. Or wouldn't. He didn't know anymore. Guilt curled in his stomach, not for what he'd done, but because it hadn't felt wrong until he saw Elise's face in his mind just now. The look she gave him when Harper said her first word. The time she fell asleep beside him, their fingers tangled. Noah swallowed, then stepped out of the car. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Foundation. "You smell like perfume," Elise said as soon as he walked in. Not accusing, just observant. Noah froze mid-step. "Office party. Someone hugged me goodbye. Claire, HR. Elise stared at him. "You're not good at lying, Noah." He didn't respond, just dropped his keys in the bowl and walked past her, toward the stairs. "Don't you want to talk about it?" she asked, voice rising, eyes sharpening. He turned. "What do you want me to say?" "That it's not true. That you still love me. That you haven't been cheating for the past 4 months. Her voice cracked. "That I haven't been stupid this whole time." Silence. Noah looked down. "It wasn't supposed to happen. That's not an answer. I don't have one." Chapter 4. The third person in the room weeks passed. The house turned cold. Elise stopped cooking dinner. Noah started sleeping in the guest room. Harper asked where Daddy went at night. Elise told her he was working late. Elise spent her time investigating. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. She found hotel charges, a burner phone hidden in his car, texts he hadn't deleted. Her brother, Julian, an ex-cop turned private investigator, offered to handle it. But Elise declined. "I need to understand," she told him, "not destroy him." Julian wasn't convinced. Chapter 5. The Confession. It was raining again the night Elise confronted him fully. "I know everything," she said quietly. Noah closed his laptop, eyes tired. "I figured you did." "She's pregnant." His breath hitched. "What?" "I saw her at the pharmacy. She's showing. She looked smug." He didn't respond. Elise's voice softened. "Are you going to leave us?" Noah stood slowly. "No, I was planning to tell you. She said it might not even be mine." "And if it is?" Noah's eyes glistened. "Then I'll figure it out. But I'm not leaving Harper, or you, unless you ask me to." Chapter 6. The Long Night. They sat in the living room, neither touching the bottle of wine between them. Elise stared into the fire. Noah watched her. The silence between them had never been so loud. "You know what hurts most?" she asked. Noah didn't answer. "That you didn't tell me. Not even after all the chances I gave you." I thought I was protecting you. No, you were protecting yourself from consequences. He nodded. And now? She asked. Now I'm scared. I'm scared I've already lost you. I'm scared of what kind of man I've become. Elise turned to him. What do you want? Noah? I want to start over. Somehow, Elise exhaled. Her eyes were soft but weary. You can't undo what you did, and I don't know if I can love you the same way again. Chapter 7. A Visitor. Natalie showed up one morning. Elise answered the door, unshowered, holding Harper on her hip. I don't want anything, Natalie said. I just thought you should know I'm keeping the baby, but I'm not expecting anything from Noah. I ended it. Elise stared at her. Why are you really here? Natalie looked at Harper. To see what I destroyed. And she left. Chapter 8. Choices months. Past. Counseling. Separate bedrooms. Rebuilding the fragile scaffolding of something resembling co-parenting, maybe even friendship. Julian pushed Elise to divorce. He'll do it again, he warned. But what if he doesn't? Elise whispered. What if you don't heal? Epilogue. Rain. Again, Elise stood on the porch watching Harper play in puddles. Noah sat beside her, sipping coffee. Not touching, not speaking, but not apart either. We could sell the house, he said finally. Maybe. You ever think about starting over? She looked at him. Every day. And I'm still here, aren't I? He nodded. For now. Elise looked up at the gray sky. Let's just get through today. The rain fell quietly around them. Final line. Some days, forgiveness felt like a far-off country. Other days, it felt like standing in the rain with someone who once broke your heart, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they could learn how to hold it better. It had been 23 days since Natalie appeared at their door. Elise counted time now, not in weeks, but in emotional miles. Some mornings she felt 10 steps away from forgiveness. Other mornings, like today, she could barely look at Noah. Across the breakfast table, Harper smeared peanut butter across her cheeks with a laugh. Messy girl, Noah said with a tired smile, reaching to wipe her face. Elise watched him, arms crossed, coffee untouched. There was something eerily domestic about this moment, something wrongly normal, as if the affair and the child and the lies had been boxed and stored in some attic neither of them had the courage to revisit. She stood abruptly. I'll take her to daycare. Noah looked up. Elise, don't, she said quietly. Chapter 10. The Boxelese opened a cardboard box in the garage that afternoon. She was looking for Harper's old baby clothes, but found something else. Photos. Letters. Receipts. A physical timeline of their marriage before it fractured. At the bottom was a dusty notebook she used to journal in. The last entry was dated 3 months before she suspected the affair. I miss Noah, even when he's sitting right next to me. I think we're both pretending not to notice the silence between us. But it's growing louder. She shut the book. Her throat felt tight. Was this her fault too? Chapter 11. The investigation Julian called. I have something, he said. I told you not to. Too bad. You're my sister. I needed to know if he's really done with her. Elise froze. And? There's no sign of contact. He cut ties, changed work teams, but he hesitated. I talked to Natalie's neighbor. There's been some trouble. What kind of trouble? Her car was keyed, house-egged. She said she doesn't feel safe. And you think I did it? I think someone thinks you did it. Elise felt her stomach twist. What are you saying, Julian? I'm saying this is messier than you think, and someone might want to punish more than just Noah. Chapter 12. Gray Areas. That night, Elise sat beside Noah on the couch. It was late. Harper was asleep. The rain outside was heavy, tapping like a nervous metronome against the windows. I talked to Julian, she said without looking at him. Noah stiffened. About me? About Natalie. Her place was vandalized. His jaw tightened. You think I did it? No. Her voice was softer now. But someone might want to hurt us. Maybe her, maybe you. Noah ran a hand through his hair. I haven't seen her. I haven't talked to her. I've been trying to fix this. You can't fix this, Noah, she said, voice trembling. You can only carry it differently. He looked at her, eyes hollow. And what are you carrying? Elise? She swallowed. Resentment, regret, and something I don't know how to name yet. Chapter 13. A stranger at the door. 2 days later, Elise found a note tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. Homewreckers raise liars. She froze, heart pounding. Glancing around the parking lot of Harper's daycare, her mind raced. She called Julian immediately. He told her to install cameras, change her routines, keep records. This isn't random, someone's watching. When she got home, Noah was already waiting, his face pale, worried. He listened to her quietly, then said, What if this isn't about the affair anymore? Chapter 14. Confessions and Surveillance. Noah brought out his laptop that night and showed Elise the footage from their new home security system. Motion-activated footage from last night. At 2:17 a.m., a figure approached their front door, hooded, thin frame, left a small box on the porch and walked away without ringing the bell. They retrieved it from the garbage. Inside, a baby rattle, and a piece of paper that said, Does Harper deserve a half-sister? Elise's hands shook. Noah whispered, This isn't Natalie. Someone wants to break us completely. Elise met his gaze. Or make us pay. Chapter 15. Rebuilding or Running. They sat on the floor of Harper's room that night while she slept in her crib, safe for now. I never wanted to lose you, Noah said suddenly. You did, Elise replied. The moment you lied to me. I don't know how to fix that. Maybe you don't, she said. Maybe we just build something new. Not what we had, but something honest, even if it's small, even if it's ugly. A long silence passed. I can live with ugly, Noah whispered, but not without you. Elise looked at Harper, then back at him. Then prove it. Chapter 16. Open Ends. Julian eventually traced the threats back to a friend of Natalie's, someone she'd once confided in, who took matters into their own hands. The charges were dropped. Natalie moved away. The baby was born, healthy. Noah never met her. Elise and Noah kept going. Counseling, hard talks, nights apart, nights together. Nothing wrapped in a bow, no neat resolution. But sometimes Elise would find Noah sitting by Harper's bed whispering stories. And sometimes Noah would wake to find Elise watching him like she was seeing him for the first time in years. Final scene. Elise stood at the edge of their backyard, hands tucked into her coat. The sky was clearing after a storm. Noah stepped beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Do you think we'll make it? He asked finally. She exhaled. I think we already did. Just not in the way we thought we would. They didn't hold hands. But they didn't walk away either, and maybe for now that was enough. The house had new locks, new routines. Elise carried pepper spray now, and Noah always checked the porch before bed. Harper, oblivious, chattered endlessly about butterflies and dinosaurs. Her world remained uncracked, bright and bubbling with absolutes. Elise envied that purity, but trust, she realized, doesn't break with a bang. It fractures slowly, like ice underfoot, quiet, deceptive, and dangerous if you forget to tread lightly. They'd made it through the chaos. But survival wasn't peace. Noah made her tea every morning now. He never forgot the honey. He never asked to be kissed. Elise always drank it, always in silence. Chapter 18. The Question. It came on a rainy Saturday. Harper, drawing in crayon, at the table asked, "Why don't we see Daddy's other baby?" The room went still. Noah looked up from his laptop. Elise froze, hand mid-wipe of the counter. Harper waited, wide-eyed, trusting them not to lie. Elise knelt down. "That baby lives with someone else. It's complicated." "Are we complicated?" A soft breath escaped her. "A little," she said. "But we love you very, very much." Harper blinked. "Okay," she said, returning to her purple T-Rex. "But—" The question lingered, its weight settling like fog between Elise and Noah. Chapter 19. The Dinner. They tried a dinner date, neutral ground. A new place. No shared history. Elise wore mascara for the first time in weeks. Noah dressed like he used to when they were still trying to impress one another. They talked about Harper, work, books, everything safe, until dessert. "I don't know if I still love you," Elise said suddenly, staring into the swirl of melting vanilla. Noah didn't flinch. "I know. But I remember who I was when I did." His voice caught. "And who was that?" She looked at him. "Someone who believed you'd never hurt me." He nodded slowly. "I miss her too." Chapter 20. A visit Elise parked outside. Natalie's new place on a whim. She didn't get out. She just sat. There were wind chimes on the porch, a tiny swing in the yard. A man opened the door, tall, thin, unfamiliar. He kissed Natalie on the cheek. She held a baby in her arms. Elise blinked. The baby's curls, dark and messy, were unmistakable. She gripped the steering wheel. She felt nothing. No anger, no grief. Just a quiet resignation. Natalie had built a life, too. One that no longer had claws in hers, and maybe that meant she could. Let go, she drove away. Chapter 21. Letters. Noah found the box again, the one with their old letters. Notes from early marriage, post-its on mirrors, grocery lists that ended with "Love you, idiot." He brought one to Elise. It read, "Let's never stop asking each other questions, even if the answers hurt, especially then." He held it out. "I don't expect anything. But if you ever want to start over, ask me something hard. I'll answer." Elise stared at the note, then said, "Why her?" Noah didn't look away. "Because she listened when I felt invisible. Because I was weak. Because I thought you'd already stopped loving me." Elise nodded once, then walked away without saying a word. But the note stayed in her hand. Chapter 22. The Fire Pit Autumn. Returned. The nights were cool. They built a fire in the backyard one Saturday. Harper bundled in a blanket between them. They roasted marshmallows. Harper fell asleep on Elise's lap. Noah looked into the flames. "Sometimes I think this is the punishment I deserve, living in a house where I can see everything I ruined." Elise stared at the fire. "It's not punishment," she said. "It's just consequence. We're both living in it." A long silence. "But I'm still here," she added. "I know. And sometimes," she said slowly, "I want to be." His voice cracked. Sometimes is enough. Chapter 23. A bittersweet. Springtime passed. Elise stopped checking his phone. He stopped flinching when she touched his shoulder. They laughed again. Awkward at first, but then real. Harper turned 5, asked again about the other baby. This time, Elise sat beside her and said, "She's your sister. You may meet her one day. That's up to the grown-ups and her mom." "Okay," Harper said. "Can I draw her?" Elise nodded. Of course, and she did. A scribbled figure beside herself, a sister, born of betrayal, now shaded with crayons and acceptance. Final scene, the threshold on. The first truly warm day of spring, Noah stood in the doorway as Elise returned from work. He looked nervous, holding a small photo album. Blank pages. "I thought we could start a new one," he said. "No old pictures. Just from now on." She looked at the book, then at him. She didn't smile, but she stepped inside and shut the door. Harper was 10 when she opened the wrong drawer. She was looking for Scotch tape for a school project. What she found was a worn manila envelope tucked beneath tax papers and old instruction manuals. Curious, she pulled it out. Inside were photographs. A few letters, a hospital bracelet labeled Eva, and a birth certificate. She read the name twice. Eva Marie Talbot. Mother, Natalie Vance. Father, Noah Talbot. She froze. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the documents. A baby wrapped in a blue blanket. A note that read, "She looks just like you. I'm sorry for everything." Ann Harper didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. Chapter 25. Secrets resurface. That night, Harper didn't touch her dinner. Elise noticed immediately. "You okay?" Harper shrugged. "Do I have a sister?" The fork clattered against Noah's plate. Elise froze. "What?" Harper stared at her father. "Eva, I saw her name. The papers. You're her dad, aren't you?" The silence that followed was cavernous. Noah's face went pale. Elise's stomach churned. "I didn't mean to snoop," Harper whispered. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" Noah swallowed hard. "Because I didn't know how." Elise's eyes narrowed. "We agreed we'd tell her when she was ready." "She's 10, Harper said quietly. "I'm not stupid." Chapter 26. The drive Elise took Harper for a drive that Sunday. Just the two of them. The roads were wet with spring rain, the windshield wipers slow and rhythmic. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you," Elise said eventually. "From what?" Elise struggled. "From the pain of knowing your family wasn't perfect. From questions you weren't ready to ask." Harper's voice was quiet. "I'm asking now." So Elise told her the truth. Not every detail, but enough that her father made a mistake, that it hurt, that they stayed together anyway. But it was never the same. Harper looked out the window for a long time. "I always thought you two were like the blueprint. Now it just feels fake." Elise didn't correct her. She knew it wasn't fake, but it wasn't whole either. Chapter 27. Eva. They met in a neutral place, a public park. Natalie was cautious but open. Eva, now 8, was shy, hiding behind her mother's leg. Harper stood awkwardly beside Noah. The girls eyed each other like distant cousins forced to play nice at a wedding. Then Harper offered her a dandelion. Eva took it. 10 minutes later, they were comparing Pokemon cards on a picnic blanket. Noah sat beside Elise on the bench, silent. "She's kind," Elise said softly. "She has your eyes," Noah murmured. Elise nodded. "She deserves to know. You. But Harper deserves answers." Noah looked down. "I don't know if I have any left." Chapter 28. The offer Natalie reached out 2 weeks later. Eva wanted to visit again. This time, maybe their home. Elise surprised herself by saying yes. Harper helped clean the guest room. She even picked out a stuffed animal for Eva. Noah stayed unusually quiet through it all. Later that night, Elise found him outside, staring up at the stars. "Do you ever regret staying?" he asked. Elise considered the question. "I regret what? We lost," she said, "but not what we became." He turned to her, eyes tired. "Do you love me now?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I respect you, And some days, I remember what love felt like. He nodded. That was enough. For now. Chapter 29. The photo Harper printed a photo of the four of them, her, Eva, Elise, and Noah, on the swings at the park. She clipped it to the fridge. It's kind of weird, she said, but also kind of nice. Family is weird, Elise replied. It doesn't always fit in neat boxes. Harper looked at her. Will she ever live with us? I don't know, Elise said. That's up to a lot of people, but she's part of you. And you're part of her. Harper smiled faintly. I think I'm okay with weird. Final chapter. The unfinished Table 1 weekend, Noah began restoring an old dining table in the garage. Elise joined him. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. He sanded. She stained. Their hands worked near each other, the rhythm familiar. When it was done, they stood in silence, admiring it. It's not perfect, Elise said. Noah nodded. But it's solid. She reached for his hand. I don't know where we're going, she whispered. But I'm tired of punishing us both. He squeezed her hand. Then let's just stay at the table. One day at a time. End. Harper was 24 when she stood at the edge of her mother's old garden, coffee in hand, waiting for sunrise. The house felt smaller now, worn but warm. Elise and Noah still lived here, though the silences between them had evolved. Less brittle, more lived in, like two people who had grown around the cracks rather than through them. Eva was visiting that weekend. She was almost 20 now, studying design, always sketching in the corners of rooms. They shared a room again, like they had years ago when the awkwardness first turned to kinship. They called each other sisters now. No asterisk, no footnote. And Harper? She'd come home after a year abroad, fresh off a breakup that felt eerily familiar in its slow, aching unraveling. Her boyfriend had kissed someone else. Just once, he said, but it wasn't the kiss that broke her. It was the lie that followed. Later that morning, Harper sat at the kitchen table with Elise. Her mother looked older, gracefully so, still sharp, still composed. But there were lines now, grooves time had, carved in places no cream could soften. Did you forgive him? Harper asked suddenly. Elise looked up from her tea. Who? Dad. For Eva. For the lie. A pause. The clock ticked. I never forgave the betrayal, Elise said slowly, but I forgave the man who committed it. Eventually. Harper frowned. Is that the same thing? I don't know, Elise said, but forgiveness isn't binary. Some days I still remember the sting. Other days I remember how we stayed. Both are true. Harper thought about that. Let it settle. I didn't forgive Felix, she admitted, but I miss who we were before I knew. Elise reached across. The table took her daughter's hand. That's the hardest part. Mourning a version of yourself that no longer fits. That evening, Harper found Noah in the garage, sanding a new bookshelf. He smiled, gestured at the project. Your mom wants it for the living room. Thinks we have too many books on the floor. Harper smiled. You're still building things. Trying, he said. It's how I stay sane. She hesitated. Do you regret it? All of it? Noah put the sander down. I regret the lie. I regret who it made me. But Eva, she's not a regret. She's a gift I never deserved. Harper leaned against the workbench. I used to think loving someone meant never hurting them. Noah looked at her, eyes soft. Now? I think it means showing up even after you have. That night, Harper wandered into the guest room where Eva was curled up with a book. Can't sleep? Eva asked. Nope. Want to talk about Felix? Harper laughed bitterly. Do I ever not? Eva set her book aside. You don't have to forgive him. But maybe ask yourself if holding on to the pain is helping. Harper stared at her sister. When did you get so wise? Ava grinned. Genetics. Lucky for you. The next morning, Harper stood at the garden edge again, barefoot, on damp grass. She watched the sunrise paint the world in pale gold. Thought about all the versions of her parents she'd known. The broken ones, the resilient ones, the quiet ones who stayed. She didn't know what kind of love she believed in anymore. But she knew this. People fail. People lie. People break and build and break again, and sometimes, if they're lucky, they still show up. Last line. Harper walked inside and picked up the phone. She didn't know if she was calling to forgive Felix or to finally let him go, but either way, she was ready to speak. The phone rang twice before it connected. Hello? Felix's voice hadn't changed. It still carried that boyish lilt, that note of curiosity like he was always mid-thought, mid-sentence, mid-apology. Hi, Harper said. A beat. Harper. He sounded breathless. I wasn't sure you'd ever... I didn't call to talk about getting back together, she said, or yell at you. I just needed to understand something. Felix was quiet, letting the silence wrap around them like an old coat. Okay, he finally said. Ask me anything. Harper looked out the window at her mother's garden. A breeze passed through, bending the lavender stalks and stirring the wind chimes into a hollow whisper. Why didn't you tell me the truth the first time I asked? Felix let out a long breath. Because I was afraid the truth would cost me you. She blinked, stung by the honesty. And lying didn't? I didn't think that far ahead. I panicked. I kept hoping I could fix it before it unraveled everything. You didn't trust me enough to tell me, she said, her voice tightening. But you trusted me to forgive the lie? He didn't answer right away. No, he admitted. I don't think I trusted anyone, not even myself. Later, that night, Harper sat with Elise on the back porch. You spoke to him? Elise asked, passing her a cup of herbal tea. Yeah. It didn't solve anything, but... Harper trailed off. It made the ache quieter. Her mother nodded like she understood. Completely. That's the thing about betrayal, Elise said. It doesn't go away. You just get better at carrying it. I don't want to carry it forever, Harper whispered. You won't. Not like this. It softens. It changes shape. Harper turned to her. Do you think it's weak to forgive? Someone who broke you? Elise smiled faintly. No. I think it's an act of grace. But only if you're doing it for yourself, not for them. 3 months later, Harper didn't call Felix again. She didn't block his number either. Instead, she moved to a small apartment on the north side of the city, closer to the river. She got a job at a community nonprofit and signed up for a storytelling workshop on Tuesdays. She wrote about her family. About Ava, about silence and memory and the years her mother bled pain so quietly no one saw. Eva visited often. She brought plants, books, and once a jar of honey from a street vendor she swore had spiritual healing powers. They never talked much about Noah, or Natalie, or the secret that tied them together. But when they hugged goodbye, it lingered, like something more than sisterhood. Like survival. Final scene one day, in late fall, Harper visited her father. He was working on the same bookshelf in the garage, older now, slower, but with the same quiet devotion in every movement. I thought maybe, she said, I could help. You finish it. Noah turned. His eyes softened. I'd like that. She picked up a brush, dipped it in stain, and began to paint the wood beside him in silence. Sometimes words weren't needed. Sometimes just showing up was enough. Last line. There were still splinters between them, but slowly, quietly, they were building something new. Noah had come to believe that guilt had a shape. It wasn't sharp or sudden anymore. It was round, worn smooth over the years like a stone carried in the pocket, always there, always just enough to notice. He didn't flinch at Elise's touch anymore, though he had for years. The first time she placed her hand on his shoulder after the truth came out, he'd gone rigid, convinced it was a goodbye in disguise. But she'd stayed, not out of pity, not because she forgave him right away, but because Elise never let pain dictate the shape of her life. She endured. But more than that, she adapted, and in return, Noah changed in small, invisible ways. He stopped taking Elise's steadiness for granted. He no longer came home late without calling. He picked up her favorite pastries on Thursdays, just because. He sat with her in silence on hard days instead of filling the air with apologies. They never returned to the way things were before. That was gone, burned to ash the moment Eva's existence unraveled their illusion of safety. But something else had grown in its place, resilience, not romantic, not idealistic, but real, and real, he'd learned, was harder and far more sacred. Every Sunday, he texted Eva. At first, she'd respond with one-word answers, then longer phrases, then questions. Now she visited every few months. Sometimes they sat on the porch and didn't speak. Other times they built puzzles or played cards. Once he told her the story of how he'd met Natalie. I was 23. She was bright, kind. I was lonely. Eva hadn't responded right away. Finally, she asked, "Did you love her?" Noah's voice was quiet. "I loved the escape. I don't think I ever really knew her. Not in the way you should know someone to love them honestly." He didn't sleep well most nights. Some dreams were of Eva at 5, laughing on a swing he was never there to push. Others were of Elise standing in the doorway, her eyes hollow the night she found out. He kept a journal now, filled it with things he never said aloud. "I still don't know why I did it. I wanted to matter to someone who didn't see my flaws. Elise deserved someone braver. I should have left before I lied." One evening, Harper visited again. She brought wine and a pie she half-baked. They laughed when the crust fell apart. "You seem lighter," he said. "I'm not," Harper replied, "but I'm tired of dragging pain like it defines me." He looked at her, a flicker of guilt rising. "I hope. I didn't teach you that kind of weight." Harper shook her head. "You taught me how to carry it." Final reflection. Noah's inner monologue. Noah stood alone in the garage after Harper left, tracing the grain of the finished bookshelf. He thought about the things he'd built, both, tangible and not. The marriage that hadn't broken, the children who still came home, the girl who didn't carry his name, but sometimes carried his smile. He would never be the man he'd once hoped to be, but he was still here, and sometimes that was its own form of grace. Last line, from Noah's POV. He ran his hand along the wood, flawed, patched, but whole, like everything that still mattered. Natalie never meant to fall in love with a married man. She told herself that often, in the mirror, in the dark, in the quiet hours after Eva had gone to sleep and the world stopped pretending to be fair. But love doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't send warnings. Sometimes it just arrives, sudden and reckless, and Noah, he had arrived in her life like a question she didn't know how to answer. At 23, Natalie was working admin at the local college. He was charming in a way that didn't beg attention, quiet, observant, funny, in a way that made you feel chosen when he smiled. He never spoke about Elise. She never asked. When Ava was born, Natalie didn't tell Noah. Not right away. She'd already seen the look in his eyes shift when the affair became something heavier. He grew more careful, more distant. Guilt had a way of hollowing out joy. So she left, moved across town, took a job at the library, raised Eva on her own, with stories and packed lunches and invisible panic every time someone asked, "Where's her father?" For years, she told herself that what she did was noble, protecting Ava from complication, from rejection. But the truth was simpler and colder. She didn't want to see the look on Noah's face if he asked for a paternity test. Eva was 7 when she asked about her dad. Natalie had smiled. "He couldn't be with us, but he would have loved you." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. And it planted a seed of resentment that would one day grow into silence and sharp questions and slammed doors. Natalie lived in fear of that day for over a decade. She knew it would come. All secrets ripen. What she didn't expect was how gentle Eva would be when the truth cracked open. She hadn't screamed, hadn't stormed out. She'd just asked, "Why didn't I get a choice?" And Natalie, who had spent a lifetime controlling outcomes, had no answer. Now, years later, Ava lived across town. They spoke weekly, sometimes daily. But it was different now. Ava was kind, but careful, like she was handling Natalie through gloves. And Natalie, for the first time, felt what Elise must have felt all those years ago. How do you compete with a wound you helped create? One afternoon, Natalie found a letter taped to her door. It was from Ava. Simple, honest, unfolded in 4 lines. "I'm not angry anymore, but I don't know if I trust you. Maybe one day we can talk about it. All of it." Natalie read it 3 times, then pressed it to her chest like it could absorb into her skin. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't sad, but because the sadness had lived with her so long, it had learned how to be quiet. Final scene, a meeting years in the making. The cafe was small, neutral ground. Eva arrived first, wearing a navy coat and a look Natalie couldn't read. Natalie sat across from her, folded her hands, and didn't pretend. "I hurt you," she said. Eva nodded slowly. "You did. I don't expect forgiveness." No." Silence passed between them, not cruel, not empty, just real. Eva reached into her bag and pulled out a photo, a recent one, her with Harper, and Elise. Natalie blinked. "They invited me to Thanksgiving this year," Eva said. "I think I might go." Natalie's smile was small, but deep. "I'm glad." Eva looked at her for a long time. "I'm not trying to replace you." "I know. But I want to understand the other parts of myself." Natalie swallowed. "You should." They sat in silence again. 2 women bound by blood and choices and a history neither of them asked for. But there they were, choosing something anyway. Last line, from Natalie's POV. Maybe love wasn't the absence of betrayal. Maybe it was what came after, the choice, to stay or to let go, and to still reach across the table anyway. When she extended the Thanksgiving invitation, she thought it would be met with polite distance, a non-committal maybe or a quiet no. But Ava said yes, 3 weeks in advance. No hesitation. And just like that, Elise felt the world tilt slightly. Enough to make her heart race. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the awareness that everything they'd survived might finally become something else. Not fixed. Not erased, but integrated. The night before Thanksgiving, Harper helped her set the table. They worked in silence at first, comfortable in the ritual, the clink of plates, the folding of napkins, the hum of something just under the surface. Finally, Harper said, "Do you ever wish you'd left?" Elise looked up. "Left who?" "Dad. When you found out." The question wasn't an attack. It was quiet, tender, and a little raw. Elise considered it, placing a spoon next to a glass. "I did." "Leave," she said. "Emotionally, for a while. I pulled away, built walls, slept with my back turned." Harper's lips twitched in recognition. "But then I looked at you," Elise continued, "at your brother, and I realized leaving didn't guarantee healing. Sometimes staying is harder." but it's also more honest. Harper nodded, biting her cheek. I used to be angry that you stayed, she said. I know, but now I think I get it. Eva arrived early. Noah was already in the kitchen, basting the turkey like it was a science project he could control. Natalie had sent a pie, a small but clear gesture of inclusion. When Eva stepped inside, there was a pause. Not awkward, just reverent. Elise approached her first. They hugged, longer than either expected. You came, Elise whispered. Eva's voice cracked. I wanted to see what survival looked like. Dinner was warm, uneven, real. Stories were shared, jokes told. Small missteps and overcooked rolls passed without fanfare. At one point, Harper handed Eva a baby photo from a box under the stairs. You look like Mom, she said. Eva blinked. Which one? Harper grinned. Guess we'll find out. Everyone laughed, but the undercurrent was gentle, like water smoothing a jagged edge. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, Elise stood alone in the kitchen. She watched the glow of the porch light spill across the snow-dusted yard. Heard Harper upstairs laughing with Eva. Smelled remnants of cinnamon and roasted rosemary. Noah stepped beside her, a wine glass in hand, tired but content. You did this, he said quietly. Elise shook her head. No, we did this. All of us, even the broken parts. He looked at her then, not with longing, not even with regret, but with respect. Thank you for staying. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked back out at the dark, at the possibility of what could still be built from ruin. Then she said, I didn't stay for you. A beat passed. I stayed for the woman I wanted to become. Epilogue. A place at the table spring came late that year. Eva called Natalie every Sunday. Sometimes she visited, sometimes she didn't. Harper traveled more. She and Eva started co-hosting, a podcast about family secrets and generational healing. They joked it was cheaper than therapy. Noah joined a men's group. He spoke, quietly, about shame and fatherhood. And Elise? Elise started painting again, not for therapy, not for catharsis, just because the silence finally felt like hers again. Final lines. Close third person. Elise. The house was still, the kind of stillness earned after years of storms. And though nothing was perfect, nothing could ever be, there was peace in the cracks. And love, not as a reward, but as a choice, made again and again. This time with eyes wide open. 6 months since the night Elise had learned how to listen. Not just to the words spoken, but to the silences between them. Since then, the fragile threads holding them together had stretched, but not broken. Harper and Eva still spoke regularly, though their conversations were often more about the future than the past. They had learned to share pieces of themselves with each other, like two puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit, but could still hold each other in place. Elise, on the other hand, struggled with a question that hadn't left her mind. What now? One night in the quiet of their bedroom, Elise asked Noah the question that had been building for months. You've been quieter lately, she said, folding the blanket on their bed. Are you okay? Noah was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The weight of his guilt, of his past mistakes, had never quite left him. But now it seemed heavier than ever. He looked up at Elise, his eyes tired but steady. I'm trying to be, he said, his voice low, but I don't know how to forgive myself for what I did, for how I hurt you, how I hurt all of us. Elise sat next to him, her heart aching, with a mix of empathy and frustration. She knew Noah was trying. She saw it in the small ways he tried to be present, cooking dinner, offering to help with the housework, listening when she spoke. But there was always something else in him, a distance that neither of them knew how to cross. I know, she whispered, but you don't have to fix it. You don't have to fix me. You never did. The truth settled between them, unspoken but clear. They had spent so much time trying to fix their marriage, trying to put the pieces back together. But the cracks weren't something to repair. They were part of the structure now, and they would always be there. I don't think we'll ever be the same, Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. Elise turned to him, her hand finding his. We don't need to be. We just need to be real with each other. Months passed, and the seasons began to change. Harper's podcast, now more successful than either of them expected, became a platform for them to dig into their shared trauma. It was strange at first to lay their wounds bare in front of strangers, but something about sharing their pain and their hope felt like both a release and a responsibility. The episode they recorded about reconciliation was the one that stuck. It was raw, uncomfortable in places, but cathartic. Eva and Natalie had begun meeting more often, taking small steps toward a relationship that felt natural, if uncertain. There was no magic moment when the past was erased. Instead, it was like watching two people walk along a cliffside, carefully choosing their steps, still afraid of falling, but determined to move forward. One evening, after an episode was released, Elise received a message from Eva. It was simple, but it felt like a bridge between them. I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I'm glad you're in my life. All of you. Elise smiled as she read it. The weight of the past suddenly feeling more like a shared burden than something she had to carry alone. She put the phone down and glanced over at Noah, who was reading a book on the couch. He looked up at her and smiled. We're getting there, aren't we? He asked. Elise nodded, her eyes soft. One day at a time. Epilogue. The years ahead, the years that followed, were not without their challenges. The scars of betrayal, no matter how much time passed, never truly disappeared. But they became part of the landscape, blending into the fabric of their lives rather than defining it. Eva and Natalie, though never perfect, found a way to make their relationship work. They spent weekends together, sharing laughs and silences. Eva never fully embraced her past, but she learned to hold it with a certain grace, accepting that some things were beyond her control. Natalie remained a part of her life, if only in the way that shadows remain part of the light. Harper and Elise continued their work, building the foundation of their own lives. They traveled, they explored, they worked through their own unresolved tensions, slowly but surely finding peace with the past. Final lines, Elise's POV. Some days, the past still whispers in the quiet moments. Other days, it's nothing more than a memory that fades with the light. And in the spaces between, love, imperfect and messy, grows quietly against all odds. Maybe it's not about fixing everything that's broken. Maybe it's just about learning how to live with the cracks. Possible title. Suggestions. The cracks between us. One day at a time. The weight of silence after the storm. Learning to live with the cracks. It had been 2 years since the fallout, but Noah still woke up some nights in a cold sweat, haunted by memories of mistakes he couldn't undo. He lay still, pretending to sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of Elise's breath beside him. But there was always something beneath the surface, a tension in his chest, a gnawing feeling that the fragile peace they had built might crack at any moment. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He did. In some ways, more than ever. It was the distance between them, the emotional gulf that neither of them seemed to know how to cross. One night, he finally broke the silence. "Elise," he whispered, his voice thick with hesitation. She stirred but didn't answer. "Elise," he said again, a little louder this time. She turned toward him, her eyes half open. He took a deep breath, gathering the courage. "Do you ever think about the things we've been through? Like, really think about it?" Her gaze shifted, and she propped herself up on her elbow. "I think about it every day, Noah." His heart squeezed. He knew she didn't mean it in the way he had hoped. "I'm sorry," he muttered, frustration rising in him. I don't know how we keep moving forward, how we're supposed to make all of this better." Elise was silent for a moment. Her fingers brushed his arm and she leaned in, kissing his cheek softly. "You don't make it better, Noah," she said gently. "You just live with it. You forgive each other when you can, and when you can't, you make space for it to be what it is." She pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes steady but soft. "You don't have to fix it. You just have to live with it." Elise's reflection. It had been so easy to focus on what had gone wrong, to let the mistakes define them. But somewhere along the way, she realized that healing didn't mean pretending the past didn't exist. It meant learning how to let it, shape them, rather than break them. There were days she still wanted to scream, days when the anger still rose, but most of the time, she was learning to sit with it. To accept that love, like life, wasn't always tidy. Sometimes it was messy. Sometimes it was a weight they both carried. But somehow it was still worth it. A few weeks later, Noah received a message from Eva. She had been working on her own journey, confronting the shadows of her past with Natalie and finding her own healing. But now, she wanted to take the next step in their relationship. She was ready to face the complexity of the bond she shared with her father, with Noah. "I want to talk. About us. About everything." Noah stood in the kitchen, staring at his phone, his stomach turning. What would they even say to each other after all this time? Was it too late? Did they even have the right to try again? To repair something that had been broken for so long? He looked over at Elise, who was standing at the counter, reading an email. For a moment, he considered not telling her, considered just letting the conversation with Ava be something between them, a quiet, private thing. But he knew better. He had to tell her. "Elise," he called, his voice uncertain. She looked up, her brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" "I got a message from Ava," he said, the words feeling heavier than he anticipated. "She wants to talk." Elise didn't immediately react, but the brief flicker of hesitation in her eyes didn't escape him. "Noah, are you sure you're ready for that?" she asked, her voice careful. "I mean, after everything." "I don't know," he said, his shoulders slumping. "But I think it's something I need to do. Something we need to do." Elise nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the rim of her coffee cup. Her expression softened, but there was a weariness there that lingered. "We've been rebuilding for so long," she said, the words laced with a quiet sadness. "I don't want to go backward, but maybe this is a step forward." This next evening, Noah met Ava at the park where they had once shared a quiet conversation after everything had come crashing down. He stood at the entrance looking for her, unsure of what he expected. Would there be tension? Anger? Would they even recognize each other after all this time? Finally, he saw her, a little older, a little wearier, but still the same Eva. She was standing by the swings, her hands buried in the pockets of her jacket. The sight of her was a strange mix of familiar and foreign. "Eva," Noah said softly, taking a few steps toward her. She turned, her eyes meeting his. There was no smile, no immediate warmth, just a rawness, an openness that he wasn't sure he could handle. "I don't know where to start," Eva said, her voice quiet, almost lost in the cool evening air. "I guess I'm just trying to understand everything. How we ended up here. How we keep going." Noah swallowed, his throat tight. "I don't know either," he admitted, "but I think we can figure it out." Ava nodded, though the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. "I want to, but I don't know if that's possible. Not for us." The words hung between them, unresolved. as they stood in the growing dusk, unsure of where their path might lead. Epilogue. The roads we choose in the weeks that followed, the conversations continued, slow, fragmented, filled with moments of tension and moments of understanding. But nothing was rushed. No apologies were forced. They took their time. Eva, Noah, and Elise. Even Harper, who had started to question her own role in the family dynamic, found herself unsure of what was next. The truth was, the future was unclear. There were no guarantees. But for the first time in a long while, they all felt the quiet possibility of moving forward, in their own time, in their own way. Final lines. Elise's POV. The cracks still existed. They would always exist. But perhaps that was okay. Because in the spaces between, there was room for new things to grow. Love, forgiveness, and even trust again. The journey wasn't linear, but it was theirs to make. And in the silence of those fragile moments, they learned that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The quiet of the morning seemed almost deceptive. It had been several months since Noah's meeting with Ava. Since then, nothing had been easy, but they'd all made an effort to adjust. The uncertainty still hung in the air like fog, but the moments of peace, albeit small, had started to feel like something worth holding on to. Noah and Elise had reached a fragile sort of understanding. They didn't talk about the affair as much, but it lingered, like a shadow that neither of them was brave enough to acknowledge openly anymore. Instead, they had started finding a new rhythm, a quieter existence, one that involved more moments of silence and contemplation than they had before. Elise often wondered whether this was what they had always been missing. Quiet, not the tension of unfinished conversations, not the clutter of words meant to fill the space, but peace. Just the simple, unspoken bond between them that allowed for moments of stillness. One evening, as Elise sat at the kitchen table, her hand tracing the rim of her coffee cup, she couldn't help but think about what she had lost in the years leading up to the betrayal. The children had grown up, and though there were still arguments about the usual household chores or their schedules, the little ones had mostly settled into their routines, learning to adapt to the changes in their parents' relationship. The house, too, had become quieter. At times, Elise longed for the hustle and bustle of earlier days, before the affair had cracked everything open, before the cracks had turned into chasms. But now, in the calm of this moment, the quiet felt different, more like a breath that came, without hesitation. She had come to realize that they had no choice but to build something new out of the wreckage of the old. Noah, for his part, had been trying to adjust as well. The guilt he carried never truly went away, but he had learned how to live with it, as Elise had suggested. The remorse wasn't constant, but it would flare up in odd moments, in the way she smiled at him or when he caught her lost in thought. At times, he would catch her staring at him, almost like she was trying to see him clearly for the first time again. It unsettled him. But there was one moment, a few weeks earlier, when Elise had said something that he couldn't quite forget. "You know, sometimes I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, and sometimes I wonder if I want to." The words had stung, but they were also a truth he'd never dared admit out loud. Trust was fragile. Trust had to be earned, and re-earned. But in that same breath, Elise had softened her gaze, continuing, "But maybe that's okay, because we can still build something. It just won't be the same." Ava and Natalie's relationship, too, had taken its own shape over the last few months. They'd talked more than ever about the things that had once been unsaid. Ava had tried, in her own way, to make peace with the fragments of her past. Her relationship with Noah, the resentment, the pain. The two of them never tried to erase those memories, instead finding a way to use them as a foundation for something more honest. But there were still days when Ava felt herself faltering, unsure of how to balance the love she had for Natalie with the darker parts of her history. She would find herself standing in front of the mirror, asking if she had truly changed, or if she was still running from her mistakes. The uncertainty was unsettling, but it had also started to become familiar. One day, Eva called Noah. She hadn't reached out much since their conversation months ago, and while they didn't talk every day, they had found a quiet space between them, a sort of unspoken agreement to leave the past behind and move forward. But this time, Noah could hear something in Eva's voice that made him uneasy. "I've been thinking a lot," Eva said, her voice tight, distant. Noah, now accustomed to the weight of these conversations, sat up straighter. "About what?" "There's something I need to do, something I've been avoiding," Eva said. "I need to speak to Elise. I need to tell her what happened, how I feel, how I've always felt." Noah felt his pulse quicken. The fear that had once been so familiar when all of this had begun was creeping back into his chest. "You, don't have to do that," Noah said quickly, but there was hesitation in his voice. "I don't think it's the right time, Eva." "I don't know if there's ever a right time," she said softly, "but I've spent so long running away from the truth. I don't think I can anymore." There was a long pause before she added, "Maybe you don't understand, but I owe her that honesty." Noah's mind raced. Elise had struggled so much to let go of the past. She had done everything she could to rebuild a new version of their life. But Ava's need to confront the past, no matter how necessary, could undo everything. "No, Ava," he said, more firmly this time. "Please, don't. It's not fair to her." But deep down, Noah knew. She had to do it, because like him, Eva would never be free unless she faced the consequences of her actions. Later that evening, Noah found himself sitting with Elise, the bae, same quiet hanging in the air between them. "I need to tell you something," he said softly, his voice careful, tentative. Elise's heart skipped a beat. She had been bracing herself for a conversation like this for weeks. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Noah exhaled slowly. "Eva wants to talk to you. About everything. She feels like she owes you that honesty." Elise went still. She had expected it, but hearing Noah say it out loud made it feel like a weight pressing on her chest. "Does she?" she asked, her voice flat. "Does she owe me anything?" The bitterness, the hurt that she had been suppressing, slipped out in that moment. Noah winced but nodded. "I think she needs to, and I think it's something you should hear." Days passed, and the tension between them continued to simmer. Elise wasn't sure what she expected from Eva, nor what she would say when they finally spoke. But she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, their fragile peace was about to be tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the days turned into weeks, Elise found herself reflecting more on forgiveness, on whether it was something you gave or something you took. And for the first time in months, she was no longer sure where the line between forgiveness and self-preservation began. Final lines, Noah's POV. The truth was an ugly thing sometimes. A necessary thing. But maybe the ugliest truth of all was that some parts of the past could never be undone. They would always haunt them. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about erasing those shadows, but about learning how to live with them. Elise had been trying to calm her mind for days, but the closer she got to that inevitable conversation, the harder it was to find peace. Her thoughts whirled in endless loops, uncertainty flooding her every moment. What would Ava say? What would she want from her? And, perhaps more frightening, what did she want from this? Did she even want to hear Eva's truth? Or had she spent so long in the quiet of their new reality that the past felt like a foreign thing, something she could leave behind? She thought about her children, about their happiness and stability. Was it selfish to want things to stay the same, to protect them from whatever storm was coming? Noah was at the kitchen counter, preparing breakfast in a silence that had become so familiar it felt like a second skin. He didn't know whether to feel guilty or relieved. He'd told Elise everything he could about Ava's intentions, but there was still a gnawing uncertainty deep in his chest. What if, in seeking redemption, Ava didn't just shatter Elise's peace? What if she destroyed everything they had, fought to rebuild? What if, in searching for closure, Ava brought everything back to the surface and made it worse? He glanced over at Elise, sitting at the table, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup, lost in thought. He knew her well enough to see the storm brewing inside her. She wasn't asking him for answers anymore. Instead, it was like she was trying to find them on her own, trying to wrestle with the truth in a way that wouldn't break her. Finally, Noah couldn't keep the silence between them any longer. "Elise," he said, his voice tentative, "are you ready for this?" She met his gaze briefly before looking away again. "I don't know," she murmured, "but I don't think it matters. Ava needs to do this, doesn't she? For her own sake. And for ours." Noah exhaled, leaning against the counter. "Maybe, but I'm not sure it's going to make things better." "It doesn't have to make things better, Noah. It just has to be the truth," she replied quietly, her voice cracking slightly. The moment of confrontation came sooner than Noah had anticipated. It was a Wednesday evening when Ava called, her voice shaking when she finally spoke. "Elise," she began, her breath catching in her throat. "I need to talk to you." I know what you're going to say," Elise interrupted, her tone unexpectedly calm, though the tension in her body was palpable. "No need to say anything more." Ava hesitated, and for a moment, Elise wondered if she was regretting this choice. Would she turn away, as she had so many times before? Or was this finally the time for them to come face to face with the wreckage? "I just want you to know that I've thought about this for a long time, and I know I hurt you in ways that I can never undo." Ava's voice cracked on the last words. "But I can't keep pretending it didn't happen. I can't pretend I don't feel like I owe you the truth." Elise closed her eyes, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as she breathed deeply. She had spent so long burying this pain, hiding it beneath the routines of everyday life, hoping it would all disappear. But the truth, no matter how hard it was now unavoidable. "Come over," Elise said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I'm not sure I'm ready to hear it, but we have to do this." When Ava arrived, the air was thick with unspoken words. She stood awkwardly at the door for a moment, almost as though she wasn't sure whether to enter. Elise had been expecting this tension. The space between them had always been strained, and now it felt almost suffocating. "Hi," Ava said softly, stepping inside. I'm sorry for how long it's taken. I wasn't sure if I could face you, or if you even wanted to hear what I have to say." "I think I do," Elise replied, her gaze piercing but without malice. "Let's just talk." They sat down, both women strangely calm as they faced each other. The years of anger and betrayal felt like a distant thing now, as if they were two strangers meeting on the edge of a precipice. Eva took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about how I've wronged you. I was selfish, and I was desperate for something I didn't understand. But that's no excuse. I took something from you, your trust, your security, your peace, and I'll never get that back." Elise nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass, her emotions welling up inside her. "No, you won't, but I think I've accepted that, Ava. I can't pretend it didn't happen, but I also can't keep living in the past. I have a family to think about." Ava's eyes welled with tears. "I don't want to tear your family apart, but I can't just disappear without acknowledging what I've done. It's not right." The room felt like it was shrinking around them. Elise wanted to hate her, wanted to scream at her for the pain she'd caused. But as Ava's tears fell, Elise realized something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Ava was just as broken as she was. Noah, listening from the other room, felt the weight of the conversation pressing in on him. He wanted to intervene, to stop Ava from unraveling the delicate thread of forgiveness that had begun to hold his and Elise's relationship together. But he knew he couldn't. He couldn't shield her from the truth. Instead, he found himself asking the same question over and over. What happens next? As the conversation unfolded, Elise and Ava both came to an unspoken understanding. This was not about redemption, or revenge, or forgiveness. It was about truth. It was about facing what had happened, without making promises they couldn't keep. When Ava left, there was no great catharsis, no magical moment of reconciliation. Instead, there was a silence that enveloped them. Elise didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply sat, processing the weight of everything that had been said. In the days that followed, things didn't magically improve. But there was something softer in the air between them, an understanding that things had changed irrevocably. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but the possibility of healing had shifted from an abstract idea to something more tangible. Final lines, Elise's POV. The future felt uncertain, but maybe that was okay. Maybe it was enough to simply know the truth and let it guide her forward no matter what happened next. The days that followed the conversation with Ava felt like walking through a fog. Elise wasn't sure what had changed, but something inside her had shifted. The confrontation with Ava hadn't provided the answers she'd been expecting, but it had brought clarity in its own way. There was no neatly wrapped conclusion, no sense of closure, only the stark reality that life moved forward, whether or not they were ready. Noah had been waiting for Elise to crack, for the walls she had so carefully constructed to crumble. But each day, she seemed more composed, her movements more deliberate. She was quiet, introspective, her gaze far away at times. He knew it wasn't because she was healed. It was something else. She had stopped needing him to carry her through this, stopped asking for his comfort. The tension in their home had thickened, not with rage, but with the unspoken acknowledgement that things were now irrevocably different. They had dinner together, the four of them, Elise, Noah, and their 2 children, just like any other evening. The routine was soothing, even if it felt more like a performance. The kids talked about their day, laughing, their voices rising and falling with the ebb and flow of life, oblivious to the underlying tension in the room. Elise sat at the head of the table, a quiet strength about her that Noah hadn't seen before. She didn't need to speak to command attention, and yet everything in the way she moved, her grace, her silence, held a weight that spoke louder than words. Noah glanced at her, noticing how she seemed to keep her distance, even when they were sharing the same space. It was as if she was learning to exist in a way that didn't need his approval or his presence to feel complete. That realization hit him hard. He had thought he was the one holding everything together, but now it felt like Elise had reclaimed the pieces of herself that he had never truly understood. That night, as they settled into bed, Noah hesitated, unsure how to approach her. They hadn't talked much since Ava had left their home. The gap between them had widened, but not in the way he expected. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even resentment. It was more like Elise had grown beyond what their marriage was. And that terrified him. "Elise," Noah began, his voice low, "do you think things can ever go back to how they were before? Before Eva? Before all this?" Elise didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned onto her side, facing him but keeping a slight distance. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I don't think it's about going back. I think it's about moving forward on my own terms, and that means facing things I've kept buried for too long." The words stung more than Noah expected. He wanted to reach out, to pull her closer, to make everything feel normal again. But the distance between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it felt like a chasm he couldn't cross. "What does that mean for us?" Noah asked, his voice cracking slightly. Elise didn't meet his eyes immediately. "It means I have to figure out who I am now. Who I am without the weight of everything we've been through hanging over me. I don't know if that includes you, or if it's just me." Noah's chest tightened. The words didn't break him, but they chipped away at something he didn't know was fragile until now. He'd always thought their marriage was something solid, something that could weather any storm. But the storm had come, and now it felt like they were standing in the wreckage of something irreparable. The next few days were filled with silence. Noah couldn't bring himself to press Elise any further. He could see she was thinking, processing, but he didn't know how to give her the space she needed without pushing her further away. He spent more time at work, as though the physical distance between them could ease the tension. But at night, when he lay in bed, it was impossible to ignore the fact that Elise was a stranger now, someone he didn't fully understand anymore. Eva's visit had opened a door Elise wasn't sure she could close. It had forced her to confront the truth about Noah, about their past, and about the ways in which their marriage had been shaped by secrets, by misunderstandings, and by their own fears. And now, Elise was left with the difficult task of finding her own path forward, without the crutch of the relationship they'd built together. Meanwhile, Ava's own turmoil was far from over. She had left Elise's house with a heavy heart, but also with a strange sense of peace. For the first time, she felt like she had been honest, not just with Elise, but with herself. The lies, the infidelity, the years of hiding behind the facade of friendship, it was all out there now. But honesty had consequences, and those consequences were real. She couldn't go back to the way things had been before. The guilt she carried was suffocating, but there was also a sense of liberation. The one thing she knew for certain was that she couldn't just fade into the background of Elise and Noah's lives anymore. They had their own journey to walk now, and Ava was no longer a part of it. She had called Noah once more, days after. The confrontation. She didn't know what she was expecting, perhaps an apology, or even just a moment of understanding. But when he answered, there was nothing but silence between them. He didn't ask her why she'd come, didn't ask her what had been said to Elise. He simply listened, his silence saying everything he couldn't. A week later, Noah sat alone in the living room, staring at the phone in his hand. He hadn't heard from Elise much in the past few days. The silence had become suffocating, the space between them unbearable. He wondered if she was making decisions without him, decisions about the future of their marriage, decisions that he wasn't a part of. He could feel the gravity of her words the other night, the weight of her desire to move forward on her own terms. The truth was, Noah wasn't sure who he was without the crutch of their relationship either. Without the role of husband and father, he was left facing the man he had become, flawed, broken, and uncertain. As the days passed, Noah and Elise moved through their lives with a fragile calm, uncertain of what would come next. Neither of them had the answers, and perhaps that was the most difficult part, to be forced to live in the uncertainty of what had happened and what the future might hold. Final lines, Elise's POV. I had to make a choice, to forgive or to walk away, to move forward with or without Noah. But what if the answer was neither? What if moving forward meant something I didn't yet understand?